Okay, on the pod today, the one and only Derek Foot, super smart solo firm runner, and was sharing recently changes he made to his delivery process where he started using video and like instead of stuff that he otherwise would have delivered via live meeting. And like career tax guy, like I was, and I don't know, didn't struck me as the dude that would be like, yeah, I'm excited about video. So I thought it'd be fun to have him on, talk about how he's done that, if there's anything he would change to that process. Are there any trade-offs to leaning into video more? Because it ultimately probably replaces some live meetings. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? So Derek got on the horn with me. We had to chat through that. I think you're really going to like this. Maybe even doubly so if you are either a solo firm runner or thinking about exploring something like that. Either way, dug into some cool video workflow stuff here. I think you'll enjoy it. Okay, if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Derek Foot in the wild yet, you want to give us the like the 30-second intro?
Sure. So I kind of did the traditional 4 years of college straight into public accounting thing. Bounced around through a few different accounting firms for about 14 years or so before deciding to go off and do my own thing. And I've been doing that for a little over 2 years now.
And you are very happily solo guy through and through. Like actually very often when I'm doing this podcast and I'm thinking of like, who are the different avatars of people listening? Like when I think solo tax guy, I think Derek. Like that's still the only way to do it as far as you're concerned, right? Like for you?
Yes. Yeah. I think about every once in a while, like adding a team or who would it look like or what would they do? And it's a mix of, not having enough maybe to keep someone busy, also not wanting to like hustle to try and make it enough. So just being solo and having all that flexibility is pretty comfortable and where I like to be right now, at least.
Like whatever your version of constraints look like, there is like definitely peace to be found in constraints, whatever they are.
Right.
But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about video. Because you, like myself, fancy yourself just a star in front of a camera.
No.
I've shared this a couple places, but basically you just shared kind of your experience of year over year. You just transitioned to like doing video deliveries with all your tax
Mhm.
returns, and there's some interesting statistics to come out of that. But I'm curious, like rewinding way back, ultimately, like what it looked like, at least externally, was pretty much as a rule, every single return you delivered this year, you delivered over video. And I'm curious how you got there, like what led you to that fundamental process change.
Yeah. So the last firm I was at had shifted away from like the intake meetings or sit down meetings to doing like a wrap up or a deliverable at the end. That was their big move that they made. So the policy was every single tax return, once you're done, you're calling the client and kind of having that wrap up conversation. So that's what I started with when I went out on my own. I basically just replicated the old process that I'd worked under. And then, just from your content and other content and talking to other professionals, kind of got cued into the idea of doing videos or other wrap ups that are less time consuming and allows you to just deliver something that's a little bit more personable, a little bit more accessible. And so that's what led me to the switch, was trying to get away from that big time constraint of it. And then I'm a small practice. I have like a lot of my clients are long-standing relationships because they followed me when I went out on my own. And so I was a little not too afraid to just kind of say, here's how it's going to be now. And then the kind of the big, like I'm trying to make it so I wasn't taking something away from them, was making sure they still had that opportunity to schedule a wrap up. So it was like, here's the video. This is what you get first. If you still want to meet with me, we can. But I put the video in front of everyone kind of as a first step.
Okay, let's circle back to the video thing, and but just to talk about the workflow and the service design aspect of it. I too, my last firm, like the norm was there needs to be high touch delivery. But it's just happening at like the worst possible time. Like the last thing in the world you want to do when it's done is then sit around and talk admin about go pay this and that, right?
That and playing phone tag was the thing. There was, at the last firm, there were days to be like, okay, all I'm doing is making calls today because I've got 10 to 20 projects that are all ready to go. I'm going to run through the list and call them, maybe get some of them, leave messages. They're going to call back. I just tank a whole day of just trying to do those wrap ups.
So did you make any sort of changes to what happens at the start of it? Like, was there a trade-off of like, okay, I'm going to do this, but maybe the front end will be more hands-on, or do you even connect those two things?
I didn't. No, the way I've kind of pitched and set up the whole process is trying to tell clients there's a lot of systems in place and there's a lot of automation in place. But what that does is it leaves me accessible for all the other hands-on stuff. So the follow-up during prep, if there's open items or questions, or maybe we're kind of putting pause while we talk about retirement options or something like that. And then I just changed that back-end delivery process at the end of it to have the video on it. But I didn't think about the process before that, and mostly just thought about wanting to make sure the client still felt like they were getting a good service out of the whole thing.
For context, do you meet with these folks before tax season? Much of them, like, are you doing planning before the end of the year, or is it mainly just a tax season thing?
So it depends on the client. I make kind of the advisory side and any sort of planning optional. And so kind of my core clients, yes, like I'm wrapping up year-end planning now, or you maybe touch base mid-year. But for a good chunk of them, it's just the compliance piece in tax season and maybe touching base throughout the year if things come up.
And does any of that change your intake or delivery methodology, or is it the same regardless?
It's pretty much the same no matter what. I work primarily with like independent bookkeepers. And so a lot of it is coordinating and handing off from them. And then that kind of gets the process rolling and making sure that the client just kind of gets to be hands off and feels like they're taken care of.
So video, to get into that, I think a lot of folks are kind of just allergic to having to look at themselves and hear themselves. Like it's almost like this primal resistance to doing that, even if they can acknowledge like maybe this would save me time. Mm-hmm. Did you like grapple with that? Like, did you have to work through that at all?
Yeah, a little bit. So the worst part's definitely like having to listen to yourself on repeat if you're trying to figure out exactly where to like cut a video or edit a video or something like that. You get over it pretty quick, I think. Like once something's just happened enough times, you can just kind of you start to move past it. The other thing that I think is I just stopped caring quite as much.
Yes.
So it's early on, it was like, oh no, I said this thing wrong, or I stumbled over my words, or something happened. And so I would like stop it and start over, or like pause and start over. And then you have to go fix all that. And now it's, if I have a little bit of a stumble or I say something wrong, I just kind of like smile and laugh and I keep going. And if it's not that egregious, I just leave it in there. And I figure like worst case, they're going to see that I'm human. And they're going to like get a little bit of like, oh, look, he's a normal person and not this super polished thing. And for most of my clients, that's probably okay. They're not going to be like, oh my gosh, he misspoke a little bit. And that's going to tank my review or something like that.
A total tangent. I saw this week somebody was kind of flexing like, oh, we're doing delivery now at this crazy scale by generating like AI avatars of ourselves doing these deliveries. So with the notion that like right now we could make Derek Bot and it looks somewhat convincing, but I think most people are still going to be able to tell. Like, could you ever imagine yourself delivering with something like that? What's your reaction to that?
My first like, is it going to really save me time? Because like I open the PDFs of the tax return or the 2-year comparison and then record the video. And once you've done it enough, that takes you like 3 to 5 minutes versus like if you're setting up like building the avatars, whatever time that takes. But then how does it do the content? Like, am I going to write a script for it or like tell it what you're going to spend as much time pulling that together as you are like just hopping on and doing it, I would think.
Yes. I bought a house this year and they sent me like a customized like celebration video, but it didn't have any people in it. It was literally just like an animation in these graphics that like was like Jason, but like the rest of it was boilerplate. And I was like, this I just wasted 90 seconds of my life. Mm-hmm. That's interesting though. To your point though, it would almost have to like do the generating of the script, which is a whole other challenge of would it actually do this the way that I would. This episode is sponsored in part by LiveFlow. I had the opportunity recently to give a talk at a LiveFlow leadership sort of retreat where they actually pulled together 30 like thought leader-y accountants sort of folks into a single space for a couple of days. And I watched in amazement as they ran these sessions, getting feedback from folks of everything that they wanted changed about the product from big things to little tiny things. To then, on the second day, I turned up early for my session and they were wrapping up a thing previously where they were outlining literally all of the changes that they had made in the product overnight according to the things that the accountants had told them the day before. And this, gang, is the value of vendors that are actually plugged into our ecosystem and showing up at conferences. LiveFlow raised a Series A couple months back, and most of the time that money just gets poured into web ads. But to see them investing it in like creating a space and literally like flying people out and saying, tell us everything that you think about our product and how we can make it better. Actual accountants, man, that is really cool, and that is the way to do it. LiveFlow, if you're not familiar, it's a tool to sync QuickBooks and Xero data, either to your spreadsheets, Excel, or Google Sheets, but also now to these live updating dashboards that are pretty cool. We did a demo of it recently on the YouTube channel. Learn more about LiveFlow, check out the link down in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by TeamUp, who helps you hire talented Filipino accountants directly. Let me just run you through what they did in the last week. I think you'll be impressed. Just kicked off 2 new recruiterments, looking for a senior tax accountant and a staff level accountant, both for firms who are returning to TeamUp for more hires. Mo hires. Active projects they've got in the works. Man, I got access to the mainframe here. Not really, they send me a weekly report now. They've got 23 active projects going. Just over 50% of those are with new firms. The rest are with firms who are coming back for more hires. And they've got 5 new hires that are kind of in the early stages, pre-recruiting. The positions, executive assistant, senior tax accountant, senior tax accountant, and accountant, 4 of those 5 are firms who are coming back to TeamUp to do another hire. And you know what that means? It means they didn't regret it the first time. You know what I mean? I don't know why I said it like that. Learn more about TeamUp? Check out the link down in the show notes. Okay, so tools. What do you actually use for recording these?
So I use Loom to do all the recording and embedding of the videos for clients. I have a webcam and a mic. I probably really couldn't even tell you the specifics of them. They're just the ones I've did a little research and picked up or got at the time, and they get the job done. So,
do you do any editing on them? Like as a rule, like will you make cuts? Because Loom actually has kind of a cool little built-in simple editor.
Yeah, so I will like just inside Loom if I need to. So if I really screw something up and I need to edit it, or like if just a chunk needs to come out or anything like that, then I'll do it if it's kind of egregious enough, I guess. But the thing I haven't done and where I maybe get tripped up sometimes is I'll forget to mention something that I want to bring up to the client. And then kind of the next thing I probably need to look at is, can I go record another video and then like drop that into it? Like I haven't gone that far to figure something like that.
Do you know if Loom does that?
I don't know.
That would be super
so far it hasn't been bad. I usually just either re-record the video and remember the second time, or if it's something pretty small, I send a message that's got the video embedded with it, and I'll just add it to that message.
For folks who are still very, very early days with video, which is most people, and still just kind of spooked at the notion of having to look at themselves or the sweat of like staring down the barrel and actually doing it. Like if you could go back in time and like give yourself a tip or two, like what would you tell early video Derek?
So I think like repetition's a big part of it, right? Just doing it, and a lot of the early ones I started over a lot. Like I'd start and stop, and I'd like stop the video and delete it and then start over and all of that. And that can be fine. It's just time consuming. So I think a lot of it is the repetition of it. The other part is just kind of refocusing where your attention's going. You can kind of put your attention on, how do I look on camera today? Or you can put your attention on, hey, these people are looking to me for my expertise and my feedback. I'm a little bubble in the bottom of the screen. They're really looking at the screen share that I have up and what's the value that I'm providing them in that piece of it. So I guess for me, it's just a lot of like just trying to shift what's important in the video and make sure that it's like, hey, that's what they really value. And anything beyond that's just even more valuable to them than, just getting a PDF or what have you.
That nugget applies to so many things, I feel like, where it's like, maybe vanity is not the right word, but it's like, people care less than you think they do. And they're like, what can I extract from this? Like, ultimately, that's what I care about.
Right. And the other piece of it is like, you have a right to more confidence than you think you do, I think, for most tax professionals. Like you're the expert, you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about. However you want to frame that as in terms of like, I'm the expert, so I know what I'm saying, or I'm the authority, so I know what I'm saying. But like, you have more going into that than you think you have just because there's a little bit of uncertainty or lack of confidence from the video. Like you have every other like right to just own it and be confident in that fact with the content that's going into it.
That was a great quote. Yeah, what was that? You have the right to say it again?
You're gonna have to go back and look at the recording because
Oh,
it's like,
dude,
yeah,
it was so smooth that I'm like, oh man, this must be a thing that I'm just not aware of.
right. Maybe like you have the right to more confidence than you think you do. I think maybe what I said.
That's
So,
what it was.
yeah.
Yeah. Get the cross stitch out. Okay. I think the biggest counter argument here that you'll hear, and let's set this up. I guess we didn't even share the statistic that you had shared online. So walk us through that. You kind of measured how did this impact the volume of follow up meetings year over year with video, without video?
Yeah, so I kept track of, or kind of went back and did some of the data on the volume of clients that did wrap up meetings or wrap up calls versus like the clients who'd watched the Loom, and it improved a little bit. I mean, I think we had a little bit more of watching the Looms than would schedule the wrap ups. The wrap up data I think got a little bit skewed in tax season. I think it's more. It was heavier. Like a lot of people would do a wrap up, or I'd make us do a wrap up because we needed to touch on stuff. But then by the time I hit everyone who was on extension, like those types of clients who are on extension, like none of them need a wrap up conversation as far as they're concerned, because it's just a compliance that you're hoping they decide to get done before September or October. So that's where I think it really dropped off a lot. So it was right about, I think like 65% would schedule wrap up meetings when I did that for everyone. And like I said, higher in tax season. But then when I did Looms, like 70% or so of all the Looms were watched. And some of them don't get watched at all, and you can kind of guess going into it who's going to watch it versus not. They're the same ones who really didn't want our conversation either.
So 70% of people watched Looms, but what was the drop in follow up meetings?
Yeah, so like 65% or so, I think, did follow up meetings in the year before.
And what percent did it in the Loom year?
Like 9 or 10%. Yeah. So yeah, I offered the, like, we can still have a conversation.
Yeah.
And pretty much no one took me up on it. And the ones who did take me up on it just need a little bit more walkthrough of, what the steps that they needed to take are. They had some follow-up questions.
What was the spectrum of reactions from clients to the video itself? Like, do they acknowledge the fact that you're making a video, or was it just like, good info, thanks?
So most people don't acknowledge it at all, which I think is something that, it was one of your early videos. I think you had said like people are either going to love it or they're not going to care. That's what made it seem like a safe bet. Like, well, you're not going to like upset anyone, worst case. So most people don't give any feedback, and then you get a handful of like, oh, this is great, thank you so much, or that made it really clear. The way, like if I'm onboarding a new client, the way I tell them now is to say like, the intent of it is you can sit down and have feedback from me at 9:00 at night if that's when you want to work on your tax return. I'm not available for 9:00 at night meetings. And generally the reception to like that sort of spin on it is that I'm giving you an additional resource seems well received, at least in those meetings and how people react.
I think we can sometimes see somebody else doing something and be like, well, that would never work for the way that my clients work. And that is like what you're describing is more of kind of the cooler, in vogue sort of asynchronous work. Like, do you have, are your clients cool, like hipster clients that work that way, or are they more traditional?
Right. So I don't know if I call them cool hipster clients, but they are, towards that younger and more tech savvy generation. And when I left the firm I was at, I went all virtual when I left, so from the beginning, it was always, hey, everything's mostly going to be asynchronous. Everything's delivered electronically, and I had a few people follow me, and I had the conversations with them who were less tech savvy, used to coming into the office and sitting down or picking up their tax returns, and just saying like, I'm not going to work that way, and we can try it if you want to try it, or, you just need to stick with, a more traditional firm.
I think you mentioned it takes you all of 5 minutes to do that video. How long is the video itself usually?
Yeah, so it depends on how much I have to walk through, but most of them are probably like 3 to 5 minutes for like a tax return wrap up and feedback video.
And are you covering like the to-dos there, or are you more like going through the tax return summary, like helping them understand what they see?
Yeah, so I do kind of both. So I get a 2-year comparison out of the tax software. So I don't show them the actual tax return because none of them are going to follow what's going on in that. But I walk through the 2-year comparison and just explain the outcome of the tax return and, and why it came out that way. And if there's any feedback to follow up on, maybe it was different from planning, or it was like our planning, or calling out different things, whatever it may be that's relevant to them. But I do all that looking at the 2-year comparison, and I just kind of use that as my outline of, we need to explain any differences or things there. And then my tax software, one of the things it does that I actually like is it does a separate PDF with all of the to-dos, all of the 8879 and the payment vouchers and anything that has to be paper filed. And so then I walk through that document as well. So I do the 2-year comparison and then switch over to the to-do document and then walk through that so they know what needs to be done.
Is that Drake?
No, it's UltraTax.
UltraTax? Hang on. Are you talking about like the transmittal letter?
No, so UltraTax, you can set it up so it prints an action required PDF, which then has all the payment vouchers and 8879 and stuff in it.
Okay. I wasted a lot of time putting transmittal letters in front of people.
It's not the transmittal letter you get. So the way I have it set up is it's like there's a page with the federal filing instructions and then the 8879 and then a page with the federal estimate instructions and then the estimate vouchers. So you basically have a series of instruction pages to point them at.
I remember the all caps actions required PDF name. Maybe I'm just forgetting things. I don't know. And you use TaxDome, so presumably TaxDome's like tracking them down for 8879 or invoicing or something like that.
Yeah, so they get a message from me in TaxDome that has the embedded video in it, and then I upload all the documents at the same time. The client copy, the action required, send the signature request, all of that.
That's another question everybody brings up is security. So you're embedding the Loom video inside of their TaxDome portal?
Right. And I also password protect the Loom video just as some additional security. So they're not getting emailed a link. I said a TaxDome can be set up so that if you send someone a message, the email will have the message in it, but you can turn that off. So there's no link in their email. They have to be able to log into their account to access it. And then, when I'm doing the video, just making sure there's no like private information in there.
Oh, so you even it's a redacted copy of the return or something like that?
It's pretty easy to do. So in the client copies, you can make it redact social security numbers. So that 2-year comparison has their name and social at the top of it, but the social's already redacted. And then the filing instruction pages generally don't have it in there.
This episode is sponsored in part by TruePrep. TruePrep's like a cool, almost like a ChatGPT-like experience for tax firms that lets you query your actual client tax data to be like, I don't know, we're gonna do some tax planning. Show me every 1040 that had over 5,000 in tax penalties last year. Like you can literally do that. Returns the whole list. It'll even let you drill into the detail. Does some other cool stuff now too, like basic tax research. Like they've built IRS publications, some background information into the platform. Client asks a quick question. You want them to draft a little memo, like draft response to the client. It's a great starting point. Also, they've even got like a very basic kind of built-in year-over-year projection tool now. So let's say your W-2 is gonna double, but your withholdings won't. Like what will that look like year over year? TruePrep's even getting into stuff like that. It's the closest thing to like an open-ended chat resource for your tax firm. Very cool, worth checking out. Learn more about TruePrep at the link down in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by Cloud Accountant Staffing, who will help you find wicked smart accountants in the Philippines. As you know, this is what I did in my firm. My last 4 hires were Filipino accountants, and they were absolute rock stars. How can Cloud Accountant Staffing help you? Well, they can help you with all the questions that you're too embarrassed to ask if you've never done it before, and you're gonna have a lot of them, and that's totally normal. The people who crap on offshore hiring online are the people who haven't done it. There's a reason that these businesses are a thing and that they're growing really, really fast. The world is getting smaller, and there's a ton of really smart accountants in the Philippines. I know because I did it myself. Now, what's the difference with Cloud Accountant Staffing? Different sort of staffing and groups have different approaches. We basically work with 2 different groups in my content that will help you find sponsors in the Philippines. They have slightly different approaches to how they help facilitate the ongoing relationship with those hires. 2 different flavors, one more direct, one more hands-on. I actually recommend that you talk with both. If that's something you want to explore, having a conversation with these groups, man, it is free. You're going to learn a bunch. I recommend doing that no matter what. So to learn more about Cloud Accountant Staffing, check out the link down in the show notes. Okay, so I think the most common counter argument is when I see what you shared and I see the, percentage of people that schedule a follow-up fall like 50 to 60%, I'm like, score time savings. The counter argument is like, what do you mean? Those are like the most valuable meetings with the client. I want them to want to have that meeting with me. That's
Mhm.
probably the juiciest counter argument. What would you say to that?
So I think some of it depends on the client relationship. Like some of these are just compliance relationships, right? And so there's really no follow-up, there's not kind of an ongoing relationship. And for me, I'm okay with that. Like that's part of the being solo and lots of flexibility and really working part-time a good chunk of the year, is there's some clients that are just compliance work. And then the clients, the other one, the ones that you have like ongoing relationships with, like I have a separate process and a separate system where I'm checking in with those clients. Where I'm saying, how is it going this year? Maybe we should touch in on something, or doing that reach out and that managing that relationship is really kind of separate from just the deliverable of a tax return, or the deliverable of whatever it might be that you're presenting at the end.
Yeah, tax season only clients are hard enough as it is, but if you're only ever having advisory conversations when you're delivering the tax return and you're like, there's a million other things I would rather be doing right now, that's really hard.
Right. And you're a big believer in trying to get clients to be more proactive. So by the time we're working on a tax return, there's pretty limited on what we can be doing, right? And you want to start being, that's where the relationship and all the value really is, in trying to get clients to be proactive. Like we should be checking in during the year. We should be planning ahead. Like, stop surprising me when we're working on a tax return and start like trying to figure stuff out in advance.
Yeah, those follow-up calls are usually explain the to-do list to me, or I don't like the outcome. This is my experience.
Right. Yeah. And if it's, I don't like the outcome, then you can't say, all right, well, here's what we're going to change. It's tax return. You're kind of stuck. So then you're just saying, well, let's start doing proactive planning next year. And if they're interested in that and they want to do that, then I put them into, my planning pipeline, basically, a separate process that tells me to reach out during the year.
So headed into next year, video-wise or intake or delivery wise, is there anything you're thinking you're going to change to that approach?
Not for the video delivery. That'll all stay the same. That worked out pretty well and did well. So I think that'll be, no changes there. I didn't have any bad feedback about it, so it should be fine. I am changing my intake process a little bit. So I had, again, coming out of traditional firms, just did the like drop-off deadline thing, where it was get me all your information by March 15th if you want it done by April 15th. Which means I had like 1 or 2 weeks of just panicky mid-March where the work's flowing in faster than it's flowing out. And you feel like you're never going to get out from underneath it. So this tax season, I'm trying to do something kind of in the middle of different ideas and do a capacity queue. So it's not a drop-off deadline. It's not like pre-scheduling the work. It's basically, I have X number of slots for tax season. Every tax return's a slot, first come, first serve. And once that's full, or once we just get far enough into tax season, it has cutoff deadline, then I won't take any more work. So the idea is, clients will submit their information. I'll take a look at it and let them know, okay, you got a spot in the queue, or here's what I still need from you to order to get a spot. Because the thing that really like stressed me out and I didn't like last tax season is I would start working on something in February and then be like, hey, I still need this one document or these handful of things. And I would get that in August. And say, why did I stress myself out having that sitting on my to-do list and doing that work in February? So trying to get away from that and just have a little bit of a different management system, but again, trying to maintain that client service side of it too.
So you're presumably doing all that checking up front, and we all probably worked for that partner who was like jostling for the resources, and they wanted the staff to work on their projects, who would say, well, that document might come in on April 14th, and then we can just ship it out the door and like just add that one document at the last minute, right? Like that's the argument for still doing it. But are you saying if we don't have 100% of information, then we do 0% of it?
Kind of, yeah, more or less. I mean, there's always going to be something that, because I'm going to check these really quickly, right? So as I'm prepping it, maybe I'm missing a thing or two, but I've already started prepping it. But if it's something I know I need up front and I don't have, maybe it's income apportionment, then I'm going to, kick it back to him and say, hey, I need this before I'm going to get started. And yeah, there's some that, okay, maybe it comes in on April 14th and we get that last piece. Sure. I don't get those done anyway. Personally, like April 1st through April 15th, all I should really be doing is like collecting 8879s and some extension calculation. So it's trying, I mean, I believe a lot in trying to teach clients good habits and to teach them to be like diligent and proactive. And there's no reason that these things should be delayed this long. And so I am not going to take on the work to like kind of enable someone else's procrastination or delay.
There's so many people listening to this right now who are in that firm that's like, oh yeah, no, our cutoff is March 15th. And then somebody brings you something on the 8th of April and the partner's like, well, we got time, right? I think we can get it out. And it's the same person that brought it in the 8th last year.
Right. Yeah. All you do is you're just teaching them the same bad habits to repeat in the future. Right. Like if you didn't like it and it stressed you out and it made your deadline worse, but you did it, all you did was tell them that, okay, you can do that again next year. Like you just don't set yourself up for success.
I think you are a great story in my mind of like what you can do with just doing your own thing. Like there's so much people kind of idolize, running something big and just growth for growth's sake without ever actually stopping to be like, yeah, but why? Like, do I have enough right now? And is that going to unlock something for me that I really, really need? What are and you've seen me, like even me, we did an episode on like kind of a guide for if you want to run a solo firm. What do you think folks need to hear about running a solo practice where maybe they're considering it? And like, what are maybe some of the things that people don't talk enough about for that type of firm?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot. It's like, what do they need to know about like that makes it seem less scary? Is that what you're thinking?
You have something right now that so many people listening to this podcast want, where it's like you had the courage to like go out and do it to begin with, but you've also iterated year over year to have a pretty cool, calm, like somewhat seasonal thing. But you also look out there and you see so many people that are working so hard doing their own thing and not getting there. And you did something different. So like what, I don't know, what do you maybe see folks getting wrong most, or maybe something you were afraid of that you later realized I didn't need to be concerned about? Like,
I mean, it's hard to answer because I think there was a fair amount of luck and good fortune in going out on my own. Like I've been doing this for 14 years. So when I walked out on my own, a lot of the challenge people who are just getting started is about like building a referral network and making those connections. And I basically walked out with those. I had bookkeepers that I worked with, or financial advisors, or attorneys. So I think it was easier for me in that respect. And so for someone who's, maybe having a harder time of it, you're going to have to kind of do that hustle to build that network, of other CPAs who aren't taking work or maybe slowing down, or financial advisors, or really the local business community has been the best one for me. You have one attorney that happens to work with a client of mine, and now it's an ongoing referral relationship between that attorney and I. And how do you make those connections is by participating potentially in local stuff. Like if you aren't going to be, so I think that's kind of maybe where I would look at is if you're not going to be industry specific, like if you're not beekeepers, if you are not going to all the beekeeper conferences and posting on all the beekeeper Facebook pages, then looking locally is probably your next best bet. Right. Local business communities or things like that, because that's where you're going to have a lot of, hey, I know this guy and, let me refer you to him, is going to come from things like that.
And you didn't necessarily wait until you were on your own to be developing those relationships. I could see maybe a concern of somebody saying like, well, I don't feel like I can start doing that until I'm on my own. But you navigated that one way or another?
Right. Yeah. Because before I was on my own, I was managing kind of my own book of clients and my own book of business within a firm, and prior to that, I'd been some sort of like tax manager for a number of years at firms. So I was already the primary point of contact for, clients and their attorneys and their financial advisors and their bookkeepers and all of that. So if you I just kind of came into that naturally. And if you don't have that, then you have to work on building that up, somehow to make those connections and relationships.
Thanks for doing this, Derek. Somebody wants to pick your brain or ask you a question about, the kind of your transition into video stuff, or even just running a solo firm. Is there a place where they ought to go hang out or get in touch with you? Where would you send them?
So I'm in all the usual places, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Twitter, all of that. But I primarily hang out on the Tax Pros Discord server. So if people wanted to chat or get a lot of good feedback from me or other people, there's a good community there to hang out with.
That's a pretty good sized community now, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't even know how many people there are, but there's a lot of people who regularly participate. It's mostly people who are solo, a few people at bigger firms or just getting started. But it's nice. One of my big concerns going out on my own was honestly getting lonely, not working in an office.
100%.
Because I just like being around people, and that Discord has gone a long way. Like that's the people I hang out with during the day, for company. So that helps a lot. So far, 2 years in, haven't gotten lonely yet. So doing all right there.
Awesome. Okay, cool. We'll drop that stuff down in the show notes. Be sure to check that stuff out. We could probably track down a way to get an invite link to. That's kind of hard with Discord sometimes because they expire.
In my early days of playing with Cognito forms and setting up my firm, if you go to taxprosdiscord.com, it gives you a Cognito form that'll then generate an invite link.
Okay, cool. We'll have a link for that down below. Derek, thank you for coming and hanging, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for having me.